Dr. Bruce Cornet, let's start with Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Hudson Valley is one of the most famous UFO hotspots in the world. And
Yes.
I don't know when this started, but you've been studying this for how long?
Well, since 1992. And Ellen Crystal was studying it since 1980. And before that, she was in California, and she was being followed home by craft that were just, floating over the street where she lived, and it freaked her out. And her parents lived in New Jersey, so she wanted to get away from them. She came to New Jersey, and then she heard about all of the sightings in near Pine Bush, so she went up there, and the craft started following her around the same way they did in California. And she ended up with a 10-year study. She wrote a book, Silent Invasion, published in 1991, right before I got involved.
Can you describe this sort of the depth and breadth of the type of craft that have been seen, and by how many people?
Literally thousands. If you talk about the night siege that happened in the early mid-1980s,
Hynek.
You had these very huge battleship-sized craft that were floating over the highways, Hudson River Valley, and people would be stopping along the highways and getting out and just watching these craft move around. And of course, Hynek and Bronio did a wonderful documentary and our book summarizing all of those sightings. But then it died down in the late 80s. And then it started back up in about 1991 when Ellen Crystal's book came out. And I got involved in 92. The book manager at a bookstore suggested I buy Ellen's book when I went in for Intruders by Bud Hopkins. And I didn't know why he was suggesting this, but I bought it and I took it home, and as I was reading it, Ellen was talking about all the roads around my house where I lived. I said, what the heck is going on here? So I got in contact with her and I said, I'm a scientist, I want you to prove this to me. Well, come out with us in the field. And the first night I went out there with several other skywatchers, the ships were flying right over our heads and diving into the ground and coming out of the ground. And one of them was really amazing, that we're standing together watching for something else to happen, because the ships would come over a ridge behind us, go around us, and then over to a place directly opposite us. Ellen had been out there so many times where she had seen these things, that this was a prime area for observing the phenomenon. And once they got over there, it would dive right down into the ground.
So 80s it was there, 90s it was there. What about now?
The last reports I have from people living in the area say the activity is picking up again. In 97 it dropped off significantly, but Cheryl Costa wrote a book, a handbook on UFOs, and she shows that the activity moved from New York into Long Island. So that's one explanation as to why.
During the 90s, there were investigations around the country into these giant flying triangles. People were seeing them a lot of different places. NIDS, that we're going to talk about in a second, did its own investigation of that. What were they? I mean, were they military planes?
Some of them apparently were. On the 17th of May, 1997, Mark Whitford, Bertrand and I were on Muddy Kill Lane. We had gotten together, grouped together, we wanted to go out, and he wanted to see all of this activity. We didn't know what to expect. We were on the west side of the Wallkill River Valley, on the opposite side from the Stewart Airport in Army Base, Air Force Base, and no sooner had we gotten up there on the road and were setting up our cameras, then two black triangles flew right over our head. And I mean, it was, whoa, what the heck? All right, let's get ready, something's going to happen. Sure enough, it did. Then one of them circled around, and it was at the end of Muddy Kill Lane, and just hovered there, waiting for us to notice it. And it brightened its lights, and so we turned our cameras and started rolling. And Dinah Bertrand had an SLR. She took time exposures, which were invaluable in being able to show that the actual path of the craft. The video was extraordinary in what it showed, because it showed this triangle. When it started to move towards us, It banked like this at a 45-degree angle and didn't turn. It kept on coming straight at us. Now, you know, with a fixed-wing aircraft, that they can't stay in the air very well at that angle. Then it flattened out, and it brightened one of its lights to the brightness of the moon. I mean, it was almost blinding, and I had a lens flare in my camera at the point. Then it dimmed it down, and then as it got close to us, it banked right in front of us and turned over onto its back. And it started flying away on its back. And you can hear us talking about it in the video. And it turned over on its back. And then Mark says, it turned over, it's on its back, you know, and as he's filming it. And then it turned sideways and was flying away from us, upside down and sideways. Then it flipped over, right, you know, and just, that was an amazing move. And then it dove down towards the ground. And as it dove, Bertrand was getting time exposures of this, and a fantastic picture shows it clearly, diving down and slowing down, slower and slower and slower.
It's like a display.
Yes.
It was like a show for you.
It was definitely a show. Then it went down to the tree level and disappeared behind the trees.
You think that's ours?
That's ours. And how I know that, or why I believe that, is that Mark is a Navy veteran, and he was called and contacted by somebody who was still in the Navy, who called to tell him that we had been given a demonstration by Skunk Works of the TR-3B.